Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So football players have all voted and decided in overwhelming numbers to continue with taking the knee in an act of solidarity. Now this has caused dissenting viewpoints, as you can imagine, particularly with the whole booing thing that took place at the Millwall game and West Ham, to be fair, and supporters have expressed their opinion on this. But what I want to ask in this video is, to what end is this going to continue? Now what I mean by that is, at what point do the powers that be decide that this gesture and whole stance have been understood, articulated, and therefore surely removes the continued need to carry on with the kneeling? Or are they looking to continue with kneeling until what? Racial harmony has been achieved in the whole globe? And this is where the phrase politics and football shouldn't mix is completely true, purely because of the divisive nature that bringing politics in with sport causes, particularly by issues that transcend the sport, and in truth, the sport has absolutely no control over. Because in football, we have an organisation called Kick It Out, which I fully support, by the way, and recognise the need for it to be created in the first place and for it to continue. And its whole objective, is to drive racism out of the sport. And this is the difference, because football, like any other sport, only has a power and duty and responsibility to try and control or even influence events that take place within its sport, within the four walls of the stadium or its organizations, whether it's head offices, whatever it may be. Whatever the sport has in control over, that's the duty in order for them to take responsibility for any actions that take place within inside of it. Outside of it, they can't control it, which is why I'm trying to understand, why do they need to continue with this gesture? And I'm pretty sure, I know I hope I'm speaking for most people, that no person ever opposed or booed when footballers took to the field and wore the famous kicking out shirts, because the whole footballing world understood exactly what its objectives was, what it fought for, what it still fights for to this day, because of the history of racism that took place, particularly in the 70s and the 80s, and how that kind of things need to be stamped out in the stadiums, in the grounds. And I'm pretty sure we've had examples, recent examples. I think of the Chelsea example with Raheem Sterling, and also on the train, which wasn't in the stadium but was in the build-up to what happened in the sport, which everyone condemned the incident of racism, and no one said anything else other than that, for what I understood. But even that, in terms of kick it out, what gets worn, is only something that takes place maybe once or twice in a season, whereas this kneeling gesture seems to be continuing with no given end date in sight. So my question to the powers at football is, how long is this going to continue? I mean, I find it funny how in this particular article it mentions that this act is a symbol of peace. Yet anyone who dares show any sort of disapproval of it is automatically deemed to be racist, as you guessed it, and threatened with lifetime bans without even seeking their views to understand what their issue is and why they have an issue with people continuing to, or footballers continuing to kneel. So, and that leads me to kind of the other question, which is regarding the voting process, because I wonder how many players actually wanted to continue with this and they weren't actually under sort of pressure from either the peers, clubs, the footballing hierarchy to vote in favour. Otherwise, I can just imagine right now if somebody voted against it, they will be outed in the press, number one. They'll be immediately called racist, number two. And most likely, and this sounds horrible, but they're most likely to be punished in the forms of fines or maybe even a club suspension. So these are three things that you have to deal with. So when I heard read this article, sorry, that says football players all voted and deciding in overwhelming numbers to continue with it, my question is, did they really do that? Or was that just down to peer pressure? Because we saw what happened in Formula One, whereas some drivers didn't want to kneel, not because they are against racism or they are even racist, but because a lot of cultures, to kneel stands for something, and people want to disassociate kneeling in regards to an act of servitude, because that's not something which they believe other than kneeling for potentially their God if they're religious, or monarchy that they believe they should be kneeling for. Otherwise, they could see it as treason or the worship of false idols. And that's completely their right. But we've seen in Formula One how people were outed in the press for not doing it, and they were shown up as, oh, maybe they're for racism. I'm like, that's madness. But that's what happens. And I can only imagine the ire that will get faced if footballers do that. But let's be honest, right now, I am waiting. I am waiting for that person who's brave enough, who dares to say no to this. And not for the reason that the mainstream media would have you believe, not because they're racist, not because they're against any sort of policies and situation that eradicates racism, but because they don't believe that kneeling is the right way to support that, given we all know the links that the kneeling, the gesture, and the movement has. But unfortunately, I do not see anyone strong enough in the game for that to happen. And that says a lot about the current state of footballers and just the sporting world as a whole at the moment. But that's what I have for today, and that's what I wanted to share with you guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, I'm out.